Hello and welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
the FAIRtax Guys.
And we have got another special episode for you here today on FAIRtax Power Radio. Part 2 of our interview with Autry Pruitt, a very non-stereotypical FAIRtax supporter who you really make some good points and you really need to listen to him.
Yep, the man knows what he's talking about. He is a board member of the Americans for Fair Taxation. He's a strong fair tax advocate, and he also has, as we mentioned before, he has his own radio show, Autry Live, which you can get online.
Yeah, and as mentioned, this is part 2 of our interview. If you missed the first part, which is FAIRtax Power Radio episode 23, you do need to go back and pick that up. Listen to that one as well. And I guarantee to you, you'll hear one of the greatest quotes ever about the fair tax.
Yeah, he ended that segment with this quote: "The tax code is used to conquer and divide, and it's eating everybody alive." One of the greatest lines about the fair tax I've ever heard. That's really good. And it's very appropriate, too.
It is. It's eating everybody alive, but it's also being used to manipulate people. The government uses the income tax to manipulate people and work it to the benefit of some people and the detriment of others. And it's just philosophically not a very good way to do it.
Absolutely. We'll see in this second part of the interview, Autry has some interesting perspectives on government and taxation and the benefits of the fair tax. So,
yeah, and one of the things that he kind of gets into that kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit when he was talking about the prebate. The prebate, again, is the fair tax's tax refund, giving you back money that you don't owe, that you did pay. And he's got some interesting thoughts about that as well.
Yeah. And as we've talked about before, the prebate is the key to fairness in the fair tax.
Indeed. So let's go ahead and pick this up. Part 2 of our interview on FAIRtax Power Radio with Autry Pruitt. Yeah, and another big misconception about the fair tax is that it does address spending priorities, that it tries to help one side and hinder the other side. And when people finally listen to it and realize it's just all about raising the money, not about how to spend it, you can reach them that way, can't you not?
Yeah. You can. And I tell everybody, it's going to make you, excuse my language here, but a hell of a lot more aware of what's going on. All of it, used to be, before they came up with this withholding scheme post-World War II, it used to be that you had to write a check to the government for your taxes. Mm-hmm. And everybody was aware. And now we read the report about the VA in Denver spending $1.7 billion on a 183-bed hospital for veterans. When we calculated it, we had to spend $2 million. You could have given every vet in the state of Colorado $2 million for that money.
Wow.
That's amazing to me. When you read about the base that was built in Afghanistan for $45-50 million that the Marines never used, they turned it back over to the Afghans, and your money is being wasted. Now, all of a sudden, if you're paying 20%, 23% taxes, and then all of a sudden the government needs more money, and they say, oh, we want to up it 1%, everybody has an interest. From the rich person to the poor person, everybody has an interest, and everybody will see, hey, wait a second, why do you need another percent? You just gave Saudi Arabia $1 billion. You just gave South Africa $200 million. You just need help, and you need another 0.5% from me? I really think that, by the way, is the status quo's biggest fear. Yeah, well, because now with the income tax it is, it's spread all around and doing anything else. And if Democrats that are concerned, the Bernie Sanders, you're concerned about big banking, you're concerned about corporations, you're concerned about how big money has influence politics, you're only looking at direct cash contributions. What you really should pay attention to is how the income tax code is used throughout any election to twist and turn politics in a certain direction. That's where the real problem is. Chase donating money into a huge PAC, that, yes, influence, but the real influence happens at the tax code level, and anybody in D.C. understands that and knows that.
Yeah, well, I think withholding is one of the most cruel hoaxes ever perpetrated on the American people, because the government is stepping up and saying, I am your highest spending priority. You will pay me before you feed your family. And you ask somebody, how much money do you make now? The ones that tell you none of your business are probably right, but the others will tell you how much they take home. They don't even consider what the government snatches off the top to be their money to begin with.
Yeah. You know, and the proof is this. I love this. So I get people that say to me, well, I get $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 back. You know, family too, I get $10,000 back. So you mean to tell me you get anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a month back? Now, I want you to go back and add up your late fees. Go back to how many times did you get an FFT? How many times did you need just a little bit of extra money this month? Or a toy came out and you wanted to get your son or your daughter a new toy. You know? Now, you just felt like, you know what, it's been a lot of stress. I just want to go out with my guys and have one or two drinks or go see a movie, and you don't have that money. You don't have that money because the government's holding your money. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican. Poor is poor. I grew up broke, busted, and disgusted. I'm telling you, broke is broke. There's no Republican broke and Democrat broke, black broke and white broke. There's just broke.
Oh, yeah. I've been there.
So the government is holding your money, and you could do more. One of the things you learn when you're running a small business, such as I do, that cash flow is your lifeblood of your business. That lesson needs to be taught to individuals. People don't run usually into problems because at the end of the year they didn't have enough income or couldn't figure out how to get. They run into problems because they have a cash flow problem. And the government is the biggest part of that cash flow, that all of a sudden at the end of the year, you're getting $800 a month on average back. That's insanity. That's rent. That's a car payment. That's a savings for school.
Yeah, well, I've run into people that talk about, well, if the FAIRtax becomes law, then I don't get my tax refund every month. And you ask them real simple, would you rather have a tax refund once a year, or would you rather have the full amount of your paycheck every pay period? And that usually gets it through to them.
Yeah. You get your full, if you make 30, they just came out with that report. 50% of Americans make $30K a year, but they actually only take home $24. Imagine this. All of a sudden, you get your full $30K every single year. Your full $30K. And if you're savvy about it and you start buying used products, you can't do it with groceries, you can't do it with services, but you start buying used products. I'm not considered poor now. I'm not considered broke now, and I still buy used computers.
Sure, why not?
If it works, especially since I'm a Mac user.
Mm-hmm.
How about a used suit jacket a blazer the other, mostly because the blazers now they make a crap. A whole other topic for a different show. So I'm just so crap. I mean, I like the brass buttons, and anyway, that's on the show. But imagine that you get, and that's what I tell people. When I go and I speak in front of a Democrat audience, I can say, "Let me see. Anybody got a W-2 they don't mind me seeing?" And then he usually has their whole year. And I say, under the FAIRtax, all that money they took out is yours. You don't have to guesstimate. You don't have to say, "Oh, am I going to get it back?" You get it all. Get what you're working for. You get what you're worth.
Yeah, I don't know anybody of any political persuasion that does not like the idea of having more money in their pockets.
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. And that's the real strategy. We as FAIRtax people, if you want to get to people on the left, you want to get to people, don't get into, because this happens with FAIRtaxers, because it's happened with me. Don't talk about Obama. Don't talk about Democrats. Don't talk bad about, as much as you can't stand Hillary Clinton, keep your mouth shut. Don't talk about that. Say, you know what? If you want to vote for Hillary, that's your right. You go ahead and do it. What I want to talk about is the fact that every single freaking paycheck, the government is taking 10, 15, 20, 25% of your money. And then you get it back at the end of the year, and you don't get any interest on it. And then on top of not getting interest on it, your money has been slowly eaten away throughout the course of the year because of the inflation caused by the Fed. That might be a little bit advanced for some people. But do you realize that? I tell people all the time, do you realize that this $8,000 you say the government owes you at the end of the year is actually probably, after you've paid all the late fees, after you avoided something, it's actually probably only worth $7,000. Mm-hmm. Because of all the stuff that it's cost you all along the way. And that's particularly close if you're poor. And this is why I say you have people at paycheck loan places, payday loan places, paying 300% and 400% interest. they're paying 300% and 400% interest on a loan for $200 or $100, when if the government let them keep their money, they wouldn't need the loan. That's the biggest progressive advance that can be made today is the fair tax. And everything else that has been proposed, the flat tax, the higher tax on the rich, guess what? Even if they tax the rich more, they're still taking your money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not going to be back like it was when it only hits the top 3 or 4%.
And even if they come along and all of a sudden they say, hey, you know what? You're poor. You didn't take any money. We didn't take any money from you. Guess what? When you went to that grocery store, when you went and bought your baby those shoes, when you did that, embedded in there was about 35% in taxes. I believe it will take about a year, but once the fair tax passes, you will see an across-the-board 10% drop in prices. So even though we propose a 23% rate, the effective rate will be somewhere closer to 13%, because I believe you will see prices drop like no other, because all of those corporate embedded taxes will be ripped out. And then all the money that's overseas and all the corporations that are going overseas will come back to the shores. The fair tax is, and this is what I tell it, stop taking people's words. The fair tax is real. It's not, we might, it's a real change.
Of course,
and that's what's needed.
I'm saying, of all of the people that are running for president on both sides now, only one is really standing solid as a fair tax supporter. Everybody else is just kind of giving you the same kind of political rhetoric that you expect this time of year.
Yeah.
What can we do to get to those people and make them take a stand for the fair tax?
Oh, man. Well, I believe it requires a strong political campaign approach. This is a little bit in the weeds, but if you look at Ohio during the 2012 election, so let's take Romney and Obama. If you look at the Ohio precinct district map and the counties that Obama took versus Romney took, you'll find that Romney took the majority. If you look at the map, red versus blue, he took the majority of Ohio. If you look at the map in its entirety. So, but when you drill down in the data, you find that what President Obama did is he took the most populous counties, the most populous precinct districts in areas. If we want to affect presidential politics in terms of candidates, that's what has to happen. We have to target the states of Florida, Michigan, Ohio. We got to drill down and tackle those specific areas. Mm-hmm. We got to drill down to those counties. I actually believe there's been a strategy to go after the middle class. I actually believe going after the working class is the biggest selling point, because you can say to them, hey, you're going to get a prebate to cover any suspected taxes that you're going to be paying for your basic. Then on top of that, you can avoid paying most of the taxes on by buying used products, which you do anyway. If you're rich, you're not going out buying a new Ford Focus. You're buying a used Ford, a used Toyota. So I believe the answer, it's in the weeds answer, but the real answer is getting down into those districts so that fair tax becomes a voting issue in those districts.
Oh, absolutely.
Listen, by the way, I believe that is Donald Trump's long-term strategy with immigration. If he gets to that point where he can start to drill down into particular counties, and start to hit those areas the most. Mm-hmm. With regards, why we should do the same with taxes. Make it so that people always talk about swing states. Real political operatives know you talk about swing counties. You talk about counties in states that swing the entire state one direction or another, and that's the granular level that we have to get to and fight on the fair tax. And it's not going to be a pretty fight. Some of our friends are going to lose their seats, but that's what has to be done.
And I do understand that AFFT is working at that national level to be talking to people in Washington. They've got a presence now that they didn't have before.
That's correct. One of the things.
What successes have we seen from that?
Yeah, one of the things we've done under Chairman Hayes is we've gotten a massive presence in D.C. Like never. Well, at least during my tenure in the fair tax, and probably not since the very beginning of the fair tax cycle, we haven't seen before. The successes that we've seen of that now is that people, I got to be careful what I reveal and don't reveal, but we have national candidates. We're not pursuing them. They're pursuing us. They're calling us and say, okay, you're a player. Sit down at the table and tell me why my tax plan that I'm proposing sucks. They're actually including us in that conversation.
That's good news.
Powerful, great stuff going on the Hill right now. There are some behind-the-scenes stuff. One of the biggest fair tax supporters, think about it, with the resignation of Boehner, the abolition of the speakership by Kevin McCarthy, the rise of Paul Ryan, vacated the House Ways and Means chair, and now the chair of the House Ways and Means, right, is a fair tax supporter.
Oh, that's great. They need to at least debate it in committee. I mean, it's been there in every Congress since 1999. It has died in committee for like 16 years running, and they should at least debate it in the committee and hopefully bring it out to the floor.
Yeah. And Kevin Brady's been a supporter of the fair tax. So we're going to see. So we're seeing some positive steps forward, some positive action. And one of the things that I've said with fair tax is we've got to realize that even though the personal proclivities, the personal point of privilege, I guess I could say, of fair tax individuals is sort of to be anti-Beltway, anti-DC. We're working with inside that DC system.
And you're making progress.
And now we're a player. So not just the establishment of DC. And by the way, it's even happening. I can't say it because it's a political season and I've been admonished not to say it, but we have major Democrat players now who are now starting to say, hey, I had someone recently say to me, if he doesn't run again, is not elected, then I'll mention it. He said to me, I can't publicly do it, but I believe 100% that the fair tax Democrat, longtime Democrat, that the fair tax is the way to go.
So you're saying there's a lot of support for the fair tax on the Democratic side that just is not available, won't be made out in the public because they're afraid of what their leadership would say or think of it?
There's a leadership problem. Just like the Republicans have had this establishment fight back, the Democrats need to have that fight back. Individuals, I believe, thought that Obama was sort of that anti-establishment Democrat. But I don't think he really was. This is not to speak pejoratively about President Obama or about any of the Democrats on the left side. But he really wasn't that. He was a different candidate. He was certainly, him being African-American, but he wasn't anti-Democrat establishment. He wasn't that. He was sort of someone that's a loose part of the establishment. I mean, he came from Chicago politics, for God's sake. Rahm Emanuel, for God's sakes, was his first chief of staff. I mean, you can't get more Democrat establishment than that.
Amen.
Right? So he wasn't really anti-establishment. And what the Democrats need is an anti-establishment Democrat. You sort of see it a little bit with Bernie Sanders rising up.
Yeah, I was just going to see, do you see anybody like that on the horizon that we could get to?
I hesitate to say this, but I think if someone could really sit down with Bernie Sanders and his economists, our economists, and go through it, he might make his way towards the consumption side of the aisle.
Yeah, really, the fair tax, the consumption tax is the only one that goes after existing wealth. The income tax goes after what you're earning now. The fair tax would target what you already have.
Yeah, I think the problem with Bernie, we're going to run into a problem with the estate tax. We're going to run into the death tax. We're going to run into some problem with some other taxes. Bernie's going to have an issue with the prebate. One of the things I've said, this is the nugget I talked about earlier that I teased about. One of the nuggets I think fair taxers are going to have to be able and get willing to swallow is I really believe that to get this through the Democrat side, we're going to end up ultimately having to put a limit on the prebate. We're going to have to end up either graduating the prebate out or creating a cutoff point, basically saying, listen, after you make $190,000 a year, you don't get the prebate anymore. I don't picture the Democrats being able to sell to their base a tax plan that basically says, hey, yes, if you're Donald Trump and you're worth $4, $5, $6, $8 billion, you're Bill Gates, you still get a check for $400 every month. I don't picture the Democrats being able to sell that to their base. And anybody who's anti-fair tax on their side will come after that like a hawk politically. Mm-hmm. I just don't bet. So that may be one area where fair tax is going to have to end up.
Yep. That to me sounds like you're adding a level of complexity to it that's going to be a little difficult to work on.
It's going to be difficult, but in its current state, the question is this: in its current state, if the bill came to a real vote, can it pass in its current state amongst Democrats, not amongst Republicans, amongst Democrats? I just don't know if that could happen. The idea, I think it would be repugnant to Democrats, the idea that individuals that make $200,000, $250,000 a year, or even $1 million a year, get a check from the government. I just don't think they'll swallow that. Because you got to remember, the left side of the aisle, so the right side of the aisle is typically about fairness. They're about equalness in terms of equal measure. But the left side philosophy, I'm not judging it, I'm just saying what it is. The left side philosophy is usually about an equality that they don't believe is an objective. They believe it's subjective. That's the whole difference. The real difference economically between the left and right is that the left usually believes in a subjective version of equality, i.e. a progressive tax system, i.e., this person is worth $1 million, they don't need $300. Versus the right side typically is more of a level, no, it doesn't matter. If they get $300, they should get $300 because it's their money anyway.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you something.
I don't know if you'd see that pass. I just don't know if you would get that past the Democrats. I
don't know. Hopefully there's enough of it on the other side that the progressivity of it would work. The fact that it targets existing wealth. I mean, you say there's a lot of things for the Democrats to like. And, of course, nobody's going to get 100% of what they want.
Nobody is. That's what I'm saying right now. The fair tax bill as it is 100% of what fair tax people want. I'm thinking about the politics of it. You asked me the political question.
Oh, yeah.
I support the bill as it is. But as a political question, if I was a Democrat and someone came to me and said, hey, how do we attack the fair tax? How do we make sure that people turn against the fair tax and think it's for the rich? The first thing I would attack, the very first thing I would attack, because it's simple to understand, is, oh, wait, they want to give a check to everybody. So that means that I would just list Oprah gets a check from the government for $500. Why does she need a check? Michael, you see what I'm saying? A lot of it is politics. It's optics. It's marketing. And I really believe that's going to be a hard thing to overcome. The only real way to overcome it is to get both parties to sit around at the table and both agree, but they're not.
Wow. Another eye-opening interview with Autry Pruitt. He really made some good points there.
Yeah, like I said, he's an interesting man with some interesting perspectives on government taxation and the fair tax.
Okay. He really caught my idea that when he was talking about basically means testing the prebate, and that there are people that would consider that a government check, usually meaning the government is transferring somebody else's money to you. But the deal with the prebate, of course, that a lot of people don't understand is that they're just giving you back your own money. And there may be some people that would begrudge Donald Trump getting back his own money or somebody like that getting back his own money. But that's really all the prebate is.
I think there's two ways to look at what Autry is talking about there. Philosophically, I don't agree with that because I tell people all the time, everybody pays the fair tax and everybody gets the prebate. But the political optics of it is what he's talking about. How do we actually get this passed in Congress? And all the best legislation there has to be some compromise. Mm-hmm. And so what he's saying is that, well, some of the people are going to say there has to be a cutoff on the prebate because the wealthy people don't need it. I don't agree with that, but it may be necessary to get it passed. It's much more important to get the fair tax passed.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you do that, though, because the fair tax is totally anonymous. And the government doesn't know whether it's you or me or Donald Trump or Warren Buffett or anybody like that who is actually paying the fair tax at the register. It may be real kind of hard to pull that off.
That's true, and it indicates an income tax frame of mind, which is very difficult for people to break out of. We've had the income tax all our lives. That's all we know. Income tax brackets, income tax this and that, the income tax levels. And so it's a very difficult frame of mind to break out of. I mean, we will eventually when we get rid of the income tax once and for all and get the fair tax. And after a few years, people aren't going to be so concerned about income tax brackets.
Yeah, well, you're right. The anonymity of it is one of the real beauties of it. But if we do have to means test it, and so we have to know who's paying it, I guess that's still better than what we've got now.
Yeah. It goes along with what Steve Hayes said in his interview with Kevin Brady, who's now the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, is that there are going to be some people in Congress who just insist that corporations have to be taxed. Now, we know that's a bad idea when it comes to the fair tax, and we're going to have to explain to them that corporations don't pay taxes. They simply pass the cost on to their consumers or their stockholders or their employees. Anyways, it is people who pays for it. So it's the optics of it. And Autry is absolutely right. We're going to have to do something about the optics to get it passed because it's very, very important for the American people that we get this passed. And we have our best shot ever at getting this done.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to a point he made right at the beginning of this segment when he was talking about how you used to have to write a check to the government for your income tax. But now through this withholding scheme, people are now thinking that they don't even see that what's withheld from them is their money. How much money do you make? They look at their net amount. And if the fair tax would make people a lot more aware of what government is actually costing them.
Absolutely. That withholding tax makes it so easy to pay your taxes, maybe too easy. It kind of, out of sight, out of mind. It's out of your paycheck before you even get a chance to take it home and feed your family. And with the withholding gone because there'll be no income tax, Bob is absolutely right. People are going to be a lot more aware of what they're paying, and therefore they're going to be a lot more aware of what Congress is spending. And that's what we need people engaged on. Get rid of the income tax, get rid of all those problems. Let's concentrate on what Congress is doing with our money. And it'll be a lot easier for us to be involved in the spending side of it.
Okay, and we're just about out of time here for this edition of FairTax Power Radio. Just have time to remind people to go to fairtax.org, www.fairtax.org. Get involved if you can make a monthly contribution or one-time contribution, whatever. Again, we really kind of want your numbers more than your money, but we really need both if we're going to get the fair tax passed.
And don't forget the monthly webinar. It's generally the fourth Thursday of every month. Go to fairtax.org, look up the information. You have to register for it, but it's very useful. They always go over the fair tax first. It's interactive. You can ask questions, and then they have a special topic that they'll handle, like how does the fair tax affect seniors? What is the nature of the prebate? Things like that.
That's going to wrap it up for this edition of FairTax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Reminding you the fair tax, once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Coming across the